Well, we're back after one of the most stunning firings of the 21st century with Penn State moving on from James Franklin. We're back with another emergency edition of the College Football Insiders, joined by my guy, John Talty, this morning, or I guess this afternoon at this point. And John is a man who cursed this podcast earlier today by saying he thought something might happen later in the afternoon. So congratulations to him and his insight. And something did indeed happen. Penn State, after 3 straight losses, including one to Northwestern, this past weekend has decided to move on from James Franklin. They're willing to eat a $50 million buyout around that number. It's the second largest buyout in college football history behind Jimbo Fisher and what Texas A&M was able to pay. So, John, I got to start here. Like, how did this happen, and how is Penn State able to afford this buyout?
It's a stunner in a lot of ways. I think, again, just with how they started this season, I mean, we had them as a title contender, right? This was the all-in year for Penn State. I don't think any of us expected that midway through the season, James Franklin would be out of a job. I mean, there's just no getting beyond how shocking this is from where we started the year to where it is now. But I think with those expectations, comes a lot of pressure. And especially when you cannot meet them, it puts you in a tough spot. And I think we saw – the Oregon loss was one thing, but I think one of the things, and we talked about this a little bit in our earlier edition of this show today, but I think we're talking about Mike Norvell with it. But sometimes one of the best things as a coach you can do is stop a loss, stop a trend, right? And I think you hear coaches use the cliche, but after they lose, you don't want to let a loss beat you twice, or in this case, 3 times, right? And I just think that whatever happened in that Oregon game, in which they had a raucous home environment, you expect to win, you lose, something broke inside of Penn State, and there was no way to fix it. And I think the version of James Franklin we saw after the end of the game last night felt defeated and broken in a lot of different ways. And I think when you add all that up with the not meeting the expectations, it puts pressure on athletic director Pat Kraft and others to make a move. And I just think that there was a lot of frustration that James Franklin was given every single thing that he wanted to succeed this year, including going out and getting the nation's highest paid assistant coach and $3 million man, Jim Knowles, and it didn't work. And at a certain point, these very wealthy men are going to say, why am I going to keep giving more money if it's not being used properly? And I think that's some of the story of James Franklin's downfall here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to bring y'all inside the insiders for a second. This was usually, I think we're not that caught off guard by firings. We're expecting this to happen. I was on the phone with an agent when this news broke, and we were talking about something that could happen at Penn State. The agent had heard like something was going down, but figured it was a coordinator, and we were kind of speculating about which coordinator could be let go. And then as we're on the phone, the staff is essentially told that James Franklin is out. And this is just, frankly, one of the more shocking firings we've ever seen. We're only 276 days removed from Penn State playing Notre Dame in the college football semifinals and almost winning that game. And you just don't see moves like this happen in college football. And I think it kind of speaks to a shifting tide we're seeing and what schools are willing to do to win. Penn State gave James Franklin everything he needed this year to go out and win a national championship, and he came up well short of that goal. And I think you saw an administration that decided to make a move because of that. And that $50 million buyout was not an impetus like I think many in the industry expected it to be. And with the infusion of capital that's going to come in from maybe private equity across the board, not only in the Big Ten, but other conferences are considering private equity, you might see more of these large buyouts move forward in the future. And it's definitely a big change for the sport. But John,
just to add on to that real fast, I just think it's funny. Like, we go through these periods where once rev share started, you have people kind of theorizing like this will be the end of the big buyouts. Like, schools are not going to be able to afford them because they have to pay for rev share. And to your point, Chris, what they do rather than trying to fix the expense problem is we'll just find other ways to get revenue, right? Everyone has a revenue problem right now. And why they had that is because they're spending $50 million on buyouts, but that is kind of just the way that college sports works. And we talked about at great length in our podcast earlier today. I fully encourage people to listen to that, of all the kind of inner workings behind it. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but yeah, between a lot of Adidas money that just came in from their shift to Nike to Adidas, to also potentially, if this deal goes through, which it could in the next week or two, for the Big Ten taking outside money, Penn State could get anywhere from $120 to $150 million in just cash, right? And so you use a third of that, pay for Franklin. And I haven't seen all of Franklin's contract because Penn State FOIA laws are a little weird, but from my understanding, there is, from at least what agents have told me, this is just, talking to various agents who have seen contracts or think they've seen the contract. I don't know. They believe he has a duty to mitigate, that he can get a job elsewhere, and that will mean less money for Penn State. If that is true, and that's just what people have told me, that lowers that $50 million deal, right? We think James Franklin will coach again, and we can talk about that in a second. But I assume he will get another head coaching job in which he will make millions of dollars. And so if that then has an impact on mitigating it, then that number gets a little smaller too.
Yeah, well, we don't need to get into private equity here. That's not the time. But if I was the labor force and I was only getting half of TV revenue instead of all revenue, I'd be looking at a firing like this and might be raising a bit of a stink. But it's a good transition point, John. There are two places we can go with this. I think we'll start with the Penn State of it all. What's next for the Nittany Lions? I know we're both on the phone and texting with people in the industry about who could come next for Penn State. Who is the person to take over from James Franklin, one of the 10 longest tenured head coaches in college football right now? And who's the first guy that comes to your mind, John, when talking around people about Penn State?
So there was, to go inside baseball a little bit here, I was texting, like I think you probably were too, Chris. You text a lot of people on a Saturday night, Sunday morning to what might happen today, right? Like, what are you keeping an eye on? Where should I keep my eyes on? And was checking in on a different Big Ten coach today who I thought might lose his job. And this person told me that person's not getting fired, but I would keep a close eye on Franklin because of what I'm hearing. And I was like, I don't think that's happening. I think you're wrong. But that person was 100% right. So that same person told me Matt Rhule is the guy to keep your eye on. I checked in with another person who's told me the same name, that there was a close relationship between Matt Rhule, who is an alum, former Penn State football player, and AD Pat Kraft. They go back to the Temple days, as you can remember. So there's a close relationship there. There are, from my understanding, some money people who also really like Matt. I don't know, Chris, how much you've been around him. I've only been around him a little bit, but Matt Rhule is one of the most normal, good dudes. I'm not tight with him. He's not a source of mine, but I've been in bars where he's been there, and he's just a great dude. Everybody loves him. You can see why he's a good recruiter, why he's able to build good relationships. So that to me is the one that I've heard the most from. I think that you'll hear Curt Cignetti's name mentioned a lot. We talked about him a lot on our podcast earlier today. He's a Pennsylvania guy. I have some skepticism as to any school pulling him away right now, but that one makes a lot of sense. And then the last one I'll mention, and I'll turn it to you on some guys you have, and they just lost again last night, so maybe he's losing a little juice. But, Matt Campbell has been extremely patient at Iowa State for waiting for the right job. And when you talk to people around him, what you hear over and over again, and I'm sure you've gotten this too, Chris, is he's waiting for a Midwest big-time job. And it's like Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan, Penn State, maybe NFL. Those are the jobs that I hear over and over again that he would be most interested in. Penn State very much fits in that. I just don't know in this current moment where things can go up and down so easily after you fire James Franklin that either of the Matts, to be honest, Matt Rhule obviously has the connections there, but either one of them, I don't know that either one of them screams to me, this guy is so obviously going to punch through that ceiling that James Franklin had at State College.
Yeah, well, I think those are three very interesting names. And those are the three names that get floated to me the most as well. I even had somebody pitch a Curt Cignetti for James Franklin trade. So that's the type of stuff that you need to inject in the veins on a Sunday morning in October when you're not expecting to talk about coaches. I think Matt Rhule is the guy that comes up first with everyone I talk to. Matt Rhule, as you said, is an alumnus. Matt Rhule, I know, is a guy that's desired that job for a long time. He's had a really good one at Nebraska, but I think the ceiling in 2025 to win a national championship is a little higher at Penn State than it is at Nebraska, although I think Nebraska's invested really nicely. Curt Cignetti would be a difficult pull. I agree with what you said about Matt Campbell. That is something people have always said about Matt Campbell and his reasonings for staying at Iowa State. He was waiting for one of the big Midwest jobs to come open. This is one of those jobs. He's another high floor coach. Is that really what the direction that Penn State wants to go? I don't know. But I think there are some other interesting candidates out there as well that we'll get to, but we'll hit on those right after this break. All right, John. I have a couple more kind of wild card candidates to throw out for Penn
Let's
State.
hear them.
But I do want to ask you real quick, of the three candidates we mentioned, so Matt Rule, Matt Campbell, and Kurt Cincinnati, who do you think raises the ceiling for Penn State? Like, who is the guy that moves the needle? I assume it's probably Kurt Cincinnati based on what we've seen, but of those three guys, who's your first call?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to become the president of the Kurt Signetti fan club, which I think makes him a little uncomfortable. But I just think the guy's awesome. We were talking about him earlier. I love his vibes. I just think that he has shown every single place he has been, he has beaten expectations. I mean, he's never worked at a place outside of when he was an assistant coach at places like Alabama. He's never worked at a place that was a traditional winner, and he has won at every single step up the ladder. I think that's unbelievable. I think that he has the kind of mindset and mentality to take Penn State to the next level. But does he leave for that job? I think that's a totally different question. But to me, he raises the bar the most. I do think what will be interesting, I'm curious what you think about this, Chris. Like, sometimes we're so prisoner of the moment. And I think Signetti is the guy, regardless as to whether they were crushing it this year, because I just believe in him. But certainly they're as hot as can be. But also, Matt Rule's having a pretty good year. Now, if you watched every single one of those games, and unfortunately I watched too much of the Nebraska-Maryland game yesterday, like, they're not blowing teams away. They're kind of eking by, but they're winning games. And, Nebraska plays at Penn State later this year. Like, I don't know what that number is to make people feel better, but like, if Matt has 8, 9, 10 maybe wins, I think it becomes so much of a sexier hire to people to say, wow, he hasn't had that much success. I think the inverse is true of Campbell already having lost a couple games, maybe losing a little juice compared to where he was a year ago, kind of rebounding and emerging as a hot candidate again.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at Nebraska's schedule, there's a real path if Nebraska finishes the way it should to go 10-2 and make the playoff. Right. There's only one ranked team left on the schedule. That's USC. You have to go to Minnesota, difficult game, but UCLA, Penn State, Northwestern, not like the most difficult schedule in the world among Big Ten teams. So there is a chance for him to make some noise. But I do agree with you, John. In the words of an agent I just texted a little while ago, he basically just said, you got to make Kurt Cincinnati say no.
Yeah.
So that's the first call, and we'll see what happens after that. But I think Matt Rule will be a very popular candidate too. I'm going to fire a couple of like not random. That's the wrong way to term that. I'm going to some out of the box names that I think would make sense there that people have raised. I think, sorry, I'm looking at some of these that have come up in our chat and with some agents as well. Dan Mullen, potentially an interesting name down the line. This is something that Brandon Marcello brought up. Penn State's the job that Dan Mullen's always wanted. Correct. I think that's a really interesting one. Manny Diaz, former Penn State defensive coordinator. Does he have enough juice after a year and a half at Duke? I don't know. But if it gets a little further down the board, we'll see. Let's see. We've got PJ Fleck has come up talking to a couple of people. I don't really see that as a partnership. Lane Kiffin's a really interesting one, although I think Lane Kiffin's bullets will be saved for a job that's likely to come up in the SEC later this year. Is the name you're going to hear?
A little more south.
There. Yeah, more south. More beach-like, I think, is the area that Lane Kiffin would like to be at.
You're right.
Brett Bielema, I thought, was a very interesting name that I had somebody floated to me. Penn State's a better job than Illinois. Brett Bielema has shown to have success in that area of the country. He is somebody who certainly is a high floor coach, but as we've seen the ceiling as well. Those are all names that have come across the list. Richard Johnson also, I want to throw out, said Fran Brown, which is a fascinating name. He is from Pennsylvania. Certainly a lot of juice there. But of those guys, John, like who really gets you excited?
I mean, Mullen is interesting, and he's undefeated right now. They have a shot at making the playoff there. I think what is interesting about this job search, and again, I think there's a pretty good chance. You need to be careful. It's October 12th, right? You got to don't aggregate me on all this stuff. But I think there's a pretty good chance that one of those first three names is who it ends up being. Because I think if I'll say this without having talked to either one of them individually, I think 2 out of those 3 names that we mentioned, they both have the same first name. If you offer them the job, they're taking it. So I don't think that you necessarily have to go super far down the list. I do think another name that would be interesting to me, Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri, as someone who offensively exciting. I I think what the challenge is, and Mullen's the one that you listed. Fran Brown's kind of interesting, but I don't know that that's sexy enough. I can just remember covering the A&M search pretty closely, and there's just so much extra pressure on getting the right guy once you spend as much as you do. So like the storyline over and over again is Penn State just spent $50 million to get rid of James Franklin. They better have the right guy next, right? That's just going to be a dominant storyline. Now, A&M search kind of got off the rails, and it maybe did not go the way some of us thought it would, but I actually think that they very much got the right guy. I'm a big Mike Elko believer, as I know you are too, Chris. Like, it worked out, but almost hired Mark Stoops. Like, it got a little wacky there. That's, I think, a potential to happen. But I would just think for them to make this move right now, that Pat Kraft has a pretty good sense, at least, of if I go ABC and ABC say no, I have D no matter what locked in. And I don't know what that shoot for the mountaintops guy is. Like maybe, Urban Meyer, Nick Saban. Like I don't know what the dream Penn State message board candidate is right now that people say you have to make a swing at. I don't know who that guy is. But I think Cignetti is the guy that I would probably at least kick the tires on first. As we mentioned earlier today, he's already making $9 million. He's about to get a raise. So I don't know. Like, is it 12, 13, $15 million to get him to leave? I don't know what that number looks like. I think the other two would say yes if you called them.
I would agree. I did see a Brian Hartline in the chat from Christopher Sowers. Brian Hartline is a guy who's had Big Ten interviews the last couple of years, like notably at Purdue for head coaching jobs. Might be a really big jump for his first job. You don't often see coordinators jump to a top 15 job in the country for their first job, unless it's an internal hire like a Ryan Day or Lincoln Riley when he was at Oklahoma. But he's an interesting name to know. And that's like, this is the type of job that can attract almost anyone. Like it's one of the, John, what would you say, 15 best jobs in college football?
Yeah, I think, I mean, because we've seen also, and I think it's been written about, like they very much have gotten their money aligned too. I mean, like, again, to start how we, started this, like they went all in NIL wise. I think combined their collectives. Like I think the money has been there this year. So I mean, you're having 100,000 plus at every game. Like in the Big Ten, outside of Ohio State. All right, Chris, let me put it to you. Where do you put it in the Big Ten?
It's behind Ohio State, Michigan. I would probably put it behind Oregon and USC when USC is going right. So it'd be fifth.
I think as long as Phil Knight is alive, I put it behind Oregon. I think that if that, I don't know how to put this, if that situation changes, I might bump Penn State up.
Yeah, like I will say, like the funding at Oklahoma State's gone down since T-Boone Pickens passed. Like it's just the reality of, that's the reality of big donors.
I am a but as someone who is a Yankees fan and know how they used to spend under George Steinbrenner versus how the kids do it, like you just don't know if, as the money gets passed down the family, whether they're going to be as interested in wanting to see Oregon win a national championship the way that Phil is. So
100%
could have an impact.
Phil Knight or Penn State's an obviously better job, recruiting base, history, everything else, but Oregon is spending like a top 3 program in college football right now. But I guess speaking of other programs, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this, John, because we got a lot of time to talk about this over the next 2 months. But James Franklin is pretty immediately the best free agent on the college football kind of coaching carousel, I suppose. This is a person who's won at Vanderbilt, who's won at Penn State, 70% win percentage at Penn State, the only 2 9-win seasons in Vanderbilt history. He is one of the most eminently qualified coaches in the country. He is now available. What do you see as his next step?
Well, I think there's 2 moves, right? Well, I guess there's 2 options for him. It's, hey, I'm getting paid regardless. Do I take a year off to catch my breath? Again, I mean, just from what we saw the last couple of weeks, he just looks like a beaten down guy that, like, it seems like the pressure kind of got to him in some ways and he just couldn't meet those expectations. Like, does he just take a year, spend time with his family, relax, move out of state college and, just do I'm going to tour college campuses and spend time with coaches and figure out what went wrong and then try to get that next big job? I think that's one option. I think what's tough, though, in particular right now, is that this is going to be one of the busiest coaching cycles I can remember. I think it already is. I mean, Penn State opening up on October 12th, and it's what? This is the sixth Power 4 job that's already opened up. I mean, Oregon State opened
The
up
fact
today.
that we're losing count in early October speaks to how many jobs have opened up.
Right. But here's the thing. And like, we spent a lot of time earlier today doing the heat check. Like, we haven't even counted Auburn, Florida, Wisconsin, other jobs that very much feel like they could come open. So I would be cautious about missing that opportunity because I think he would be a good candidate for a lot of those jobs. I just think there's a concern sometimes when guys don't take time to catch their breath and immediately jump into a new job after getting fired. I don't know how often that works, to be honest with you. And I can think of a recent example is just Gus gets fired at Auburn. Didn't really seem to fully deserve it, but then jumps right into a UCF job. I remember thinking that's a great thing. And like, he had success there, but maybe like he might have benefited from a year off to like catch his breath rather than jumping right into it. I don't know. If you were James's agent, what would you advise him to do?
I would advise him that if he could get, let's say, a Florida, you take a Florida. I think there are only like 15 jobs in the country that have a realistic chance to win a national championship every year. Florida is one of them. Florida's probably going to come open at this point. That's just what people in the industry say. If an Auburn comes open, I don't think James Franklin would be the first, second, third call there, just how that program works. But I would consider an Auburn. Everyone else, I don't know. Maybe a Maryland comes open. I know that's close to home. You might consider a reunion if you're James Franklin. Otherwise, I'd probably go do a year of TV on ESPN or Fox or whatever. I think James Franklin would be a very attractive person in that scenario. Sure. And then you are the best available coaching candidate for the next 2 cycles, and you can have your pick of jobs. So I don't think James Franklin will have a difficult time finding a job. I think it's finding the right one. And I think James Franklin would be the most attractive candidate for almost any of the available searches that there are right now. So he is going to have more options than people think, even after 3 straight losses and getting fired in the middle of October with a national championship worthy team.
But if I'm James Franklin, though, like, I'm not taking UCLA. I'm not taking Arkansas. I think Virginia Tech is really interesting just because it taps into his recruiting, base. But I was on HQ earlier, and Bud did make a good point that I kind of forgot about, that they just hired a Penn State guy and it didn't work. So you just don't know if even they want to go down that path of like going with James Franklin. But Virginia Tech's the one that I consider that's like the real one. If you get offered that job, you take a year off and you take it. That is like the line of demarcation for me out of jobs that are open right now. But I agree with you. Like, if he gets Florida, which if I'm Florida, I'm not hiring James Franklin. No offense to James Franklin. All of the things that they have issues with are kind of what he does. But if he got offered that job, I would absolutely take it if I was Franklin.
I would kind of, in some ways I disagree. I think Florida's a roster with everything necessary to win. It's just some of the execution stuff that doesn't really go their way. I think Penn State particularly has struggled in close moments because they are talent deficient, at least until this year, compared to some of the other teams in the conference. But I think Florida's going to have a list of intriguing candidates if it wants to go that direction.
I just meant more from like the expectations thing of like them wanting to win. I just feel like I just think he might benefit from being at a place where the expectations are slightly lower. That's what I meant. I agree with what you're saying otherwise.
Oh yeah. There's no question. I mean, if you've got a Virginia Tech, that's a home run. Like, he is the ultimate floor raiser. Virginia Tech quite publicly has said they need to raise the floor so they make more money in the ACC rev share distribution. Like, that's a marriage that makes a ton of sense on paper. It's just a matter of if James Franklin wants to take, I don't want to say that step down in terms of program quality, but like, if you go to Virginia Tech, you are not competing for a national championship every year. That's just the reality. Quick note before we go about the transfer portal. I think people are used to when the transfer portal opens, it immediately triggers a 30-day window. And people probably thought that's going to be the case at Penn State and at Oregon State today. There was a rule change from the NCAA earlier this week that changed how the transfer portal operates for teams with coaching changes. That window is now triggered 5 days after a school makes their new hire. So you won't see transfer portal entrance for schools like this until late November and early December. I got that clarified again by the NCAA today. So that's the reality. No Penn State players are going to the portal the next couple of days. But going to be an interesting.
Can I add one thing to that? I also think it's interesting because I remember Zenitz and I wrote about this last year about how would the portal impact the coaching cycle. Similar to that, they pushed back the dates, right? So now you're going to have, I think it'd be the first 2 rounds of the playoff will have already occurred before this new winter portal period opens up. So hypothetically, if Matt Rule takes Nebraska to the playoff and they lose in the first round, well, then he's going to be available by the time that portal comes back open. So I just remember a year ago, there were a lot of people saying probably can't hire a guy who's in the playoff because of the portal, but Now those guys could get through 2 rounds and still be available to you right when that portal period opens up. That could have an impact on who you hire for some of these jobs.
I really wonder if Nebraska fans would trade Matt Rule for 2 rounds in the playoff.
I think you would. Curious. Yeah, I think you would.
You would too. But I think the Luke Fickell thing, we talked about this earlier today on our other podcasts today, the Luke Fickell thing, and this is a question from Thomas Hahn in the chat. I think we'll see more about Luke Fickell's future here in 2 weeks. They play Ohio State and Oregon the next 2 weeks. They go into a bye. Luke Fickell's buyout is not small. And I think there's a possibility it's even bigger than it's been reported. I need to look into that more. So I think we'll learn more about Luke Fickell later in the year. But John, do you have anything to add about Luke Fickell before we hop off?
That was the Big Ten job that I was looking into more this morning.
Yeah. I figured.
There's been some speculation. I think, like Chris said, I would keep an eye on the next couple of weeks how that plays out. But I would say just because he has not been let go to this point does not mean that he won't eventually be let go.
Absolutely. Well, another crazy Sunday in college football and one of the craziest seasons I can remember. This coaching carousel is only going to get wilder. So buckle up, guys, and stay with the College Football Insiders. If you enjoyed today's show, please like and subscribe. Feel free to fire off comments in the YouTube comments. We'll try to answer them best we can. And we'll be back with you on Tuesday. For John Talty, I'm Chris Summer. Thank y'all so much.